And welcome to the Administration and Operations Committee meeting for October the 15th. As far as attendance, we've got Mayor Bailey and Councillor McAlpine joining us via Zoom. We've got Councillor Chambers is going to be a little bit late. Councillor Howes will not be joining us. And other than that, everybody is present, so we do have quorum, so that's good. As far as the agenda, does anybody have anything to add to the agenda? Councillor Miller.
One item under other business, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay. Seeing none, can I get a mover for the agenda? Councillor Coleman, Councillor Bell, questions? All in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Declaration of pecuniary interest, any now? Councillor Garneau?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. 8.2.
8.2, thank you. Any others? Okay. So delegations, we got a couple delegations today. 4.1 is Cameron Johnson from Millard's Chartered Professional Accountants. Is he? Yep, come on up. Yep. Whenever you're ready, please go ahead. Just make sure that the light on. There we go.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for having me today. So today we're just going to be going over the financial statements. So I'm going to start with the auditor's report, which is on page 2 of the financial statements. So that outlines that we have audited the consolidated financial statements of the County of Brant, which comprise the consolidated statements of financial position as at December 31st, 2023, and the consolidated statements of operations and accumulated surpluses, changes in net financial assets, remeasurement, gains and losses, and cash flows for the year that ended in accordance with Canadian public sector accounting standards. We have conducted our audit in accordance with Canadian auditing standards. The auditor's report also goes on to outline management's responsibilities, which include the preparation and fair presentation of the consolidated financial statements and the internal controls in order to produce those financial statements. Those charged with governance are responsible for overseeing the county's financial reporting process. The auditor's report then goes on to outline our responsibilities as auditors, which include identifying and assessing the risks of material misstatement and developing an audit plan to address those risks. We obtain an understanding of the internal controls in order to design and test the information. We also evaluate the appropriateness of the accounting policies used, and we evaluate the overall presentation, including the notes of the financial statements, and we obtain sufficient and appropriate audit evidence over the group that's consolidated within the statements. So now I'll just provide a brief overview of the consolidated financial statements. As noted in the auditor's report, the statements are prepared in accordance with Canadian Public Sector Accounting Standards, or PSAB. The consolidated entities include the operations of the county, along with the Brant County Public Library Board, as well as your proportionate share of the John Noble Home. I'll just identify that the Brant Municipal Enterprises is accounted for on a modified equity basis. So what that means is BME's accounting policies and principles are not adjusted to conform with those of the county, and inter-organizational transfers and transactions and balances are not eliminated under this method. BME issues separate financial statements prepared in accordance with International Financial Reporting Standards, and they are audited by Millards. So on the consolidated statement of financial position, you'll note that financial assets include things like cash, investments, tax, and other receivables, and the county's investment in BME. The county also this year has adopted PS 3450 financial instruments. This standards were adopted prospectively from the date of adoption of January 1st, 2023. This new standard provides requirements for the recognition and presentation and disclosure of financial instruments. So on January 1st, upon the adoption, there was a $2 million adjustment made, and this has been outlined on the consolidated statement of our measurement, gains, and losses, which is the new statement within this financial statements overall that will be there year over year now in accordance with this new standard. And that is further outlined in Note 2 of the financial statements. Liabilities include standard amounts such as accounts payable and accrued liabilities with long-term liabilities as well. There are also a number of liabilities that include estimates. Those include post-employment benefits, which were determined by actuarial evaluation this year in accordance with PSAB. Asset retirement obligations is a new standard that was brought in this year, is PS 3280. This standard addresses the reporting of legal obligations associated with retirement of certain tangible capital assets. This includes things, your landfill is now included in there, as well as things like asbestos and other removal costs. Staff reviewed assets listing during the year to determine any obligations and worked to estimate those costs in order to incorporate them into the financial statements. This was done on a modified retroactive basis, and this is further outlined in Note 2 on page 13 of the financial statements. I'll just highlight an overview of what those implications were. So upon adoption, there was an increase to tangible capital assets of 18 million and an accompanying increase of approximately 16 million to accumulated amortization, as well as an opening accumulated surplus decreased by about 1.3 million, and the landfill liability was incorporated into this new account, our ARO number that's on the financial statements. This year, I'll also note there's an increase in net long-term liabilities due to a new debenture taken out during the year. The county has net financial liabilities of approximately 40 million at the end of December 31st, 2023. Non-financial assets include things like your tangible capital asset, which represents the county's expenditures on things like land and building, machinery, equipment, and infrastructure, as well as assets under construction at the end of the year, less any accumulated amortization taken to date, as well as prepaid expenses and inventory. On the next page is the consolidated statement of operations. There you've got revenue, which includes taxation, user fees, and service charges, transfers of both federal and provincial governments, as well as other revenue sources. Total revenue at the end of the year was approximately 140 million, up from 137 million in the previous year. Expenditures are presented by functional area. However, on page 28 of the statements, it also outlines it by segmented information, so you can get the information presented in a different way depending on your needs. Total expenses for 2023 were approximately 105 million, up from 96 million in the previous year. The increases were largely driven by costs and protection services, recreation and cultural services, and social family services. I would also draw attention to the budget column in this page. The budget is presented here in accordance with PSAB as required by the standards. This has been converted from your original budget that was approved to a PSAB compliant budget, and this is the transformation from that is outlined in Note 18 further for your review. Overall, the county has an annual surplus from operations of the year of approximately 23.9 million. I won't go through all the notes, but they are an integral part of the financial statements. If you have any questions, please let me know. I'd just like to thank the staff, Heather and Karen, and everyone else involved for their assistance over the course of the audit. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Any questions from committee? Councillor Bell?
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to our delegation. You're not Cameron Johnson, are you?
No, Sir Cameron is away this week, so I'm just filling in on his behalf.
Yeah, that wasn't my question, but you're not Cameron. No, my question is on net tangible assets. A little while ago, we had an asset management study done, and I think I recall the number of $2.5 billion as being the value of all the assets that we hold, or perhaps the replacement value of all the assets we hold. I noticed we've only got 400 and some billion, so 400 and some million in here. Does that reflect the fact that we've written off or amortized something like 80% of our assets? And is that an indication that we need to be investing a lot more?
So I think part of it is that the information reported in the statements is on a cost basis, so that would have been whatever that asset cost at the time. If you'll look, I believe it's page 28 or 29 in the financial statements, it does break out the tangible capital assets cost less what you've amortized to date to get you to that ending number that you're seeing. So yes, the original cost is outlined in the notes.
Yeah,
I can get you the...
I think that clarifies it, thank you. The other thing I note is that we have taken on $20 million of debt in the last year, which is the biggest, I think it's the biggest addition to our debt that I can see in the last many years. Do you look at all at the ability of the organisation to afford that debt, or is that not part of your audit?
We do look at any new debt taken on, and we look at where the cash is going throughout the year, and that's disclosed on the cash flow statement. We also look, as required by the standard, over the next 5 years, those payments that are being required. And we do look in the budget to make sure those payments are being incorporated in the coming years. But past the 5 years, it is something, maybe in a 10 or 15-year plan, that does need to be considered, those new payment amounts.
Okay, Councillor Miller?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have three to the presenter. Just a question of clarification. And it's page 6 of your report. It's the solid statement of changes in net financial assets. And you have acquisition of tangible capital assets, and then it says net of transferred CIP. What does CIP stand for?
It's just the construction in progress, so that's assets that haven't been completed as of year end. But that number is also disclosed on page, I believe it's right there at the back, page 30, the back there. It's construction in progress, so it's just assets that haven't been finished yet, so they aren't incorporated into that number yet.
Construction in progress, CIP. Okay, so it's a $10 million change from 2023. Does that have to do with the landfill, or what's
No,
that $10 million made up of change?
those are just specific assets that were purchased during the year, so they're completely different assets than the previous 46 million. But again, if you go to the statement of tangible capital assets, which is the last page in the statements, it'll give you a breakdown of where that money was utilized. So a lot of it was based in infrastructure as well as machinery and equipment.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions from committee? Okay, seeing none, can I get a motion to receive? Councillor Coleman, Councillor Oakley. Any other questions? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, moving on to 4.2, Byron Tan is going to talk to us from Watson and Associates in regards to the 2024 Development Charge Background Study. Welcome, Byron. Whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, members of the committee, members of staff, and the public. Oh, sorry about that. Good morning. Sorry if you didn't hear me. Good morning, Chair, members of committee, staff, and the public. I'm here today to provide you with an update to the Development Charge Background Study and the draft bylaw that we're considering later this month. So just a little bit of opening remarks. Sorry, I apologize. I do have a little bit of a cough, so if I sound a little bit hoarse, it's because please thank my son from his field trips last week. So anyways, I'm here today just to provide a little bit of a recap of the summary of what's transpired to date. We have released addendum number 2 now to your background study, and we also have some updated DC rates, and then kind of provide you a little bit of an overview as to where we are compared to what was presented to council initially back in June of this year. Excuse me. So just a little bit of a recap. So we started this process again last year. We had a council workshop earlier in April, late April. We met with the stakeholder in the development community in May, released the background study end of that month. Subsequent to that, we had Bill 185 come into force, which allowed you to provide, which allowed you to provide, growth studies as a recovery as part of your capital program. So that was not included initially as part of the May 24th release. So we did update the background study in order to incorporate that, as well as some other minor changes to one of the services. Subsequent to that, we had the public meeting in June 25th. However, because of the timing and of the requests by the development community to have a little bit more of an engagement, we actually passed a minor addendum, a minor amendment to your bylaw to remove the expiry date so that we could push off the the bylaw passage, beyond your September expiry. So since that time, throughout the months of August and September, we met with the development community on a couple of occasions, discussed some of their observations, some of their key takeaways from the background study, and really kind of wanted to flesh out exactly what items would they like addressed. So that took the latter half of the summer and just into the fall. Subsequent to that, correspondence, we thought it was very successful. We then took that findings and summarized it within the addendum report, which is now in front of you as addendum number 2. And so we released that last week, and we're here today again now to provide you a little bit of the findings of that addendum, and then really coming back on October 22nd to get your consideration of the bylaw. So the purpose of Addendum 2, again, it's meant to update the original background study that was released in May 24th, and again amended on June 20th. I already mentioned that we did have that correspondence with the stakeholder community, and through that, staff, ourselves at the firm, we went through a number of capital projects as well as all of the other ones that were brought up by the development community. Because of that reassessment, we ended up amending 8 of the 12 services, so basically 2/3 of your development charge services, and they're noted here at the bottom: Parks and Recreation, Library, services related to highway, which is your roads and related, fire, water, wastewater, storm, and studies. So just the next few slides are just going to summarize exactly what's being portrayed within the addendum report. It's a little bit more detail in terms of the write-up. However, for your benefit here, you just want to show you a little bit of the changes in terms of the capital that was reassessed. So for example, for Parks and Recreation, we were able to reduce the net DC amount by re-examining the field house and event facility space, as well as correcting some of the debt financing amounts. There were some different methodologies in assuming what was included as part of that discounted growth-related interest costs. So we were able to correct those, and you can see that changed that dollar figure from 5.8 million down to 1.2. And then, as I mentioned, with that field house, 4.8 to 0, at least for this round in the DC. That resulted in basically just over a $4,200 decrease to the Parks and Recreation, and roughly almost 20 cents decrease in the non-residential side. In the library, we attributed basically a post period and a benefit to existing calculation to a couple of items. So you can see here again, we corrected the growth-related debt, and then as well as the New Glen Morris branch, we've reduced the net DC capital amount from 800,000 to 522. That resulted in a smaller decrease, but although a decrease from 2570 to 2,143, and a 2-cent decrease on the non-residential side. In terms of roads and related, you can see there's a number of changes there, mostly with respect to Grand River Street North, the Rest Acres Road interchange, and then the Bishopsgate Road interchange. So overall, these changes reduced the highway services related to highway DC from 14,500 down to 14,450. And it's again another 2-cent decrease on the non-residential side. In terms of fire, we took a look at some of the provisions, particularly with upgrading your current facilities. We assigned a benefit to existing, recognizing that some of the upgrades, may benefit more so the existing community rather than the development side. So you can see there, there's another decrease of just over $115, going from $26.45 to $25.27, and then a decrease of 4 cents on the non-residential. The largest decrease that came about the addendum report actually was with respect to wastewater services. So again, this is us, in chatting with the development community as well as, the public works staff for the county. we had a chance to reassess the capital program. And again, as I said, with the growth-related interests, we were able to reduce that amount. But the largest components here are your treatment plants. So initially, we had a $91 million recovery for the Paris wastewater treatment plant. We've dropped that down to $62.3 million. Now, again, keeping in mind that these are still estimates, and once you have further examination of what the actual build will be for this Paris treatment plant, then these will have to be updated in the future. But for now, in speaking with the development community, we felt that this level of investment, or at least for this amount to be included in the DC, would be appropriate at this time until those estimates come in through your RFP process. Then we also have the St. George Water Pollution Control Plant. So that's a sizable decrease from 22 million to 9 million. And that's partially due, well, actually, most of it is due to, the county securing the Housing Enabling Water Systems Fund. So because you got that large $35 million grant, that was able to reduce the cost of this facility. And then you can see for the other ones, there's some reshifting of force mains and sanitary pumping stations, and these are due through correspondence with the development community. But overall, you can see the decrease is from $23,600 to $15,700. So sizable amount, and pretty much a good chunk of our overall decrease within the addendum. From the non-residential side, that's from $7.12 down to $4.76. In terms of water, so this has gone down as well. As you can see, there was a change to the growth-related interest costs. However, we did identify the need potentially for oversizing of other water mains that may not be captured as part of the DC. So that's included in the calculations, but overall, you can see that we're still dropping by about $1,600 from $14,000 to $12,400. And then from the non-res side, $4.17 down to $3.70. And then stormwater, again, a minor adjustment to the interest costs. So that'll drop the charge from $444 to $409. And then roughly a penny on the non-res. And then in terms of growth studies, there were some changes with respect to these projects. You can see with the design guidelines, the master plan, the archaeological master plan, and the secondary plan. We made another adjustment just because some of these projects, the entirety or at least the output that comes out of it, don't necessarily benefit 100% of your DC services. So we made an adjustment to recognize that some of the information that would fall out of these master plans or these guidelines would really benefit non-DC services because really the studies have to relate to a DC service in order for it to be eligible. So that reduced the charge by $1. However, on the non-res side, given how the res non-res calculations work, that's a decrease of about 3 cents. So in terms of the new calculated rates, as you can see on the screen here, and I'll quote the county-wide with the urban services. So if you're building within the county and you receive water, wastewater, and storm services, the potential charge is $62,155. If you're constructing a home that does not have water, wastewater services, then you are paying $33,572. As we go down the table, the smaller the unit, the smaller the number, the lesser the number of people are residing within these dwelling units. So you can see the charges are decreased depending on the number of individuals living in those homes. So, for example, if you're in an apartment, it's $42,768. If you're in a small apartment, really a one-bedroom or studio, $28,000. And then from the non-residential side, we're at $15.05 per square foot. Now, in terms of rate comparison, sorry, there's a lot of different columns here, so please bear with me. The first off, the ones in yellow, these are the ones that are amended as per addendum number 2. So again, it's 8 of your 12 services, so 2/3 of your DC service program. You can see here, as of September 1st, we indexed your current DCs. So we're currently at $47,073 for a fully serviced single-family home. And when we released the original background study on May 24th, we were at $75,683. Subsequent to that, on June 20th, again, we went up to $76,426 because we added growth studies. However, again, because by going line by line and re-examining every single project that what we could potentially include within the forecast period relative to what could be excluded outside of the DC forecast period, our new calculation is now $62,155. So essentially a $14,000 difference from addendum number 1 that was released in June. In terms of the other categories, because I know, while singles may be always the benchmark for most municipalities, in your case, you do see a lot of multiples as well as apartments within Brant County. So you can see for multiples, the revised calculations drops us now to $40,650. For the 2 bedrooms plus, again, we're at $42,768, a drop from the $52,585. And then for the smaller apartments, studio and 1 bedroom, we were at $34,594. Now we're at $28,134. In terms of non-residential, again, similar story. You're currently at $11.25 per square foot. As of addendum number 1, we were at $18.18, and this addendum report brings us down to $15.05. And looking at your survey of municipalities relative to where you're currently at and where it's proposed, you can see you're a little bit really to the right-hand side of the graph. Just above, let's say, Niagara on the Lake, but just underneath Thorold. But these recalculated charges get you above Fort Erie, but less than your Guelph, Waterloo, Kitchener, etc. And in order to read the graph, the green slivers at the bottom, they're the educational development charges. The gold is the upper tier, if there is a 2-tiered system. Or in your case, if it's a single tier, then you're just the blue. Or it'll be lower tier for those that have a 2-tiered system. In terms of commercial, really you don't move the needle that much, even though you are going up by a couple of dollars. So you can see here, right now you're just above, Woodstock, less Norfolk. And this new calculated charge just gets you just a little bit, above the Norfolk County calculated commercial charges. But you can see everyone else on the left-hand side. And then in terms of industrial, you can see here that, Brant County, again, you're still on the right-hand side. And, with the recalculated amounts, you're just going up by about 4 additional rankings. So passing Thorold, which really has 2 different industrial charges. And then you have Kitchener and Niagara on the Lake. And then it's yourself as the new calculated amounts. And that concludes my presentation. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Byron. Questions from committee? Councillor Bell.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Byron. Byron, can you explain in simple terms what discounted growth-related interest is? Because if you add all those items up, that's quite a significant reduction from the previous amendment.
Great question. Through the chair, through the councillor. So the way that the calculation should work, and this is what we corrected, was that your DCs get indexed every year. So if we're including interest costs, and it's the full interest costs, then technically we're collecting more into the future because you inflate your development charge. And that interest cost would be part of the capital program for recovery. So what we had to do was actually go through a future discounting. So essentially, what would your interest costs be in order to pay for your whole interest and principal program in today's dollars, discounted, because recognizing that every year you increase the value of the development charge recovery. So this way, when you're indexing your charge, technically what we're including in the DC is a discounted interest amount, so that by the time we get to the end, you're basically equal to what you're supposed to pay in interest without getting a little bit more recovery from the development community.
Should that not have been in the base presentation we had? Because that sounds like a fundamental way of doing the calculation.
That is exactly how we do it. It was just that because the interest rates, there were certain capital programs that had the interest calculated on separate sheets. The discounting did not occur when it was translated to our Excel files. So there was only, while it looked like it was across the board, there was only a few items that actually were affected by this transition versus the ones that we already had within the model from existing debt that occurred over the last couple of years.
Yeah, thank you. A couple more questions for me.
Yeah, go ahead.
Maybe this is a question for our operations staff. It always raises the question mark in my mind when I see big changes to capital numbers, and particularly the Paris wastewater treatment plant expansion has gone from 220 to 150. That's a huge change, and I would appreciate some explanation of why we've made that change.
Rob?
So we're in the DEA for the Paris wastewater treatment plant as we speak, and we're probably about 2/3 of the way through it. Should be finishing it up in probably spring of 2025. So we were using the best numbers we had at the time when we did the initial calculations for the DC, and that's what our consultant told us. We went back to them and said, "This really doesn't look good. We don't have the study finished and whatever." We reevaluated what we thought it might be in a couple of different scenarios. So what our anticipation is we'll finish the DC now, and if the number has to go up for whatever reasons, then we'll bring that information back to council and consider whether we would do an interim change to the DC. One thing we heard from the development community was that raised from 46,000 or whatever it was up to 77,000 was too much for them to take in one haul. They have right now that some of them have sales which would have been affected by that, and it was a real big hit. So some way of moving the yardstick, so maybe a couple times would be a lot better. So we thought this project isn't far enough along to make that number in stone. So we decided to go with the phased approach.
So if the number ends up at 220, let's say, just use this one item, then what we've done is basically move the cost of paying for that onto not the immediate purchases of new homes, but the purchases of new homes 5 years down the road when we got the right number. Is that correct?
That's correct. It'll be the equivalent. Byron will probably tell you I'm wrong on this, but it's the equivalent of what I would say is a phase-in, right? So for the next couple of years, for sure, those homeowners will pay a lower amount, and then it'll become whatever it is if we change it. And then, yes, more of the costs will be put off. But these numbers will be paid over a large number of developing both homes and square footage for ICI.
Okay, thank you. Final question. There are some big changes to capital items, which I guess is a foretaste of what we'll see in the budget presentation in January. A little bit of me says it would have been appropriate to run this past council first to make sure that there are no big challenges to that re-evaluation of the capital program, because that's typically what we do in January. We did it last January, so that is the basis on which this thing should stand, not something that hasn't yet been agreed by council. So I'll leave that on to staff to think about for the future. I think it's a misstep in the process, and it sounds like it's a misstep to help serve the needs and the demands of the development community.
Any other questions from committee? Councillor Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To you, Mr. Tan. I think the development community's got to be pleased with the decrease. Have you talked to them?
Through the chair, I didn't ask them for their comments on whether they're happy. We presented them and there was no further comments. So silence, I guess, is golden.
No news is good news. No, it just seems like a big decrease. Now, some of it is, yeah, going from 220 to 150 or the 35 million for St. George, that always helps. But a lot of these though, and I'll take the fire protection services. You have provision for upgrading facilities. The previous net capital cost was 2 million. Now it's 1 million. But that $1 million still has to be paid for. So that, instead of going on DCs, now would be going on the ratepayers. Is that a correct interpretation?
Yeah, so any deductions, if it is truly, like, let's say, a benefit to existing calculation, then that would be included or recovered through non-DC sources.
Okay. Just because you sounded happy that the DCs were going lower, but I'm thinking, yeah, but somebody's got to pay. Well, somebody's got to pay the piper, so there's only one source. Okay, and then the last question, Mr. Chair, to Mr. Tan. The ambulance, yeah, I think you went from 218 to 318. We are they're going to be moving into some facilities. Now those facilities are leased. If we were building those facilities, we could probably put a portion of that on DCs. But if we're leasing, nothing. Is that right?
Through the chair, actually, regardless of whether it's leased or owned and constructed, we can put the capital component of those lease into the program, and I believe we've done that as well as part of this process. So you are a 25-year lease for a new facility, and we have included the capital component of that within the DC for recovery.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, just very quickly myself, what jumped off the page to me as well was the major reduction for the Paris wastewater. That kind of scares me a little bit, but when you're taking a third of it off, but we'll see how that all pans out. Most everything here, like you say, has gone down. There's been a few added that we didn't see before. But for the Highway 403 Rest Acres Road, that's gone up about 3 million. Can you kind of explain to me why that one took such a big jump? Mark.
Through the chair, to the chair, just remind me which project is we're talking about here. It's the Rest Acres Road in 403. So it's the ramp terminal project.
Yeah, it's the 403 Rest Acres Road ramp interchange. Yes.
Yeah. So this is the new numbers, which we now have, and we have a report later on the agenda, which we'll talk about this again.
Okay, so this isn't the fact that it's been recalculated. Then it's just the fact that these are new numbers.
These are good numbers because we're going to be considering an agreement, entering an agreement with the ministry to undertake this at those costs.
Okay, I'll take that answer. And then the last one I had, actually, Councillor Bell hit it, so I'm good. No other questions from committee? All right, thank you very much, Byron.
Thank you.
Motion to receive. Councillor Kyle, Councillor Bell, any other questions? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Very quickly, Councillor Bell, what time do you have to depart us? Okay, thank you. Okay, so we're going to move on. Adoption of the Councillor McAlpine did leave, yes, yeah, and the mayor as well. Section 5, Administration Operation Previous Minutes. Can I get a mover? Councillor Oakley, Councillor Miller, questions? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Any business from those minutes? Seeing none, moving on to consent items. 7.1 RPT-0187-24, the Source Water Protection Plan and Assessment Report. Can I get a mover, please? Councillor Coleman, Councillor Garneau. Any questions on that report? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? That is carried. 7.12 RPT-0344-24, 40-kilometer-an-hour neighborhood zones. Can I get a mover for that, please? Councillor Bell, Councillor Oakley. Questions? Councillor Oakley.
Through the chair to staff, I'm curious, in this instance, why we're looking at going down 40 kilometers an hour rather than 30 kilometers an hour. From statistics I was reading off the Canadian Association of Road Safety Professionals, it quotes a further 30% reduction in fatalities going from a 40 kilometer pedestrian vehicle interaction down to 30 kilometers. So I'm curious, if we're making the change, why not just go the extra step and make it that much more safer?
Yes, through the chair. So I've read the same statistic as you have, Councillor Oakley. The 30 kilometer an hour where people are implementing, some municipalities are implementing it across the province is just for school areas. What most municipalities are doing is reducing to 40 kilometers in neighborhoods. And that's what we're stepping towards here in residential neighborhoods off the main collector or arterial roads, which will increase the safety. Why we're looking at neighborhoods is that's where people are out playing street hockey, ball hockey, walking their dogs, stuff like that, crossing roads, going to local parks. So what we're doing here is in line with what other municipalities are doing. And this also aligns with our transportation master plan that's also been previously approved by council. Looking at the 30 kilometers an hour, I'm approaching that with caution. What I'd like to do is do this implementation over the next 3 years, and we see how it works for the county. In our school zones, as you know, we're moving towards automated speed enforcement, which should greatly increase safety as well. Hopefully we get a lot of people to start driving by the posted speed limits. And then also to speak a little bit more about the 30 kilometer an hour, I'm speaking with my colleagues in other municipalities that have implemented it, and they're getting a lot of pushback because 30 kilometers an hour is quite hard to achieve on a regular basis, and the residents aren't happy. And so I'm just watching it, and we'll see how this program goes. And then if council wants us to further investigate 30 kilometer an hour, we would do that and bring back some to council. Is that
perfect? Thank you very much.
Councillor Kyle, then Councillor Bell.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Through you to Greg. A couple questions. The first one is over the 3-year period, is there a reason for phasing it in versus just going through and dropping them all to 40 that you have on the list?
Through the chair to Councillor Kyle. Yes. Whenever we've implemented big change here, there's always been pushback or ideas come back to us. We want to have the flexibility to get feedback after the initial phase. When I first stepped into this role in 2019, that couple days later, we removed the alternate parking, and Councillor Pierce, Councillor Howes, they'll remember a lot of pushback and education we had to do. So what we're trying to do is phase this in 15%. If it goes really well, we get good feedback, council gets good feedback. Then the following year, we'll do the 35. That means half the county will be done. And at that time, we can just plow through and do the last 50%. This is just, and also we still, in the roads department, we have small staff, and this is an additional program. We want to use that first 15% to get it right, get everyone's feedback, and then we can move forward. I think it's a good way to approach a large program like this, because there'll be a lot of communication with the public.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Greg. And then my last question, and I know there's going to be a lot of residents who are excited to see that this is happening, so I think it's a good thing. But I'm just wondering, what is the definition of area? Like it says Glen Morris West area. So what are we defining as an area, just for clarity?
Okay, through the chair to Councillor Kyle. We were trying to figure out how to word this, so that's why we included the mapping. So the Glen Morris area, we've left the main thoroughfares, like the main artery roads, all at their 50 or 60 or whatever they were. So when you say the area, you look off of that Glen Morris Road area, and then just all the side streets, you'll notice that they're highlighted. That's where it'll be 40 kilometers an hour. So it was just so that when you actually look at the map and the areas, you can see that we've treated the whole county the same. And then when we do the rollouts, we'll work with the communication group to provide those maps with some further explanation and really paint out a simple picture for everyone to have a better understanding of the program and where the speed limits change. This is, as it says in the report, this is still fairly new. The municipality has been putting it in place, I think, over the last couple of years, but the Ministry of Transportation worked with us so that we could just change areas to 40 kilometers an hour. And that was something that helped municipalities to roll out these programs.
Good with that? Okay. Councillor Bell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you to Greg. Greg, when we change speed limits, we always have the concern that people will not actually respond to that. How are we going to monitor, and when will you report back on what the change has been?
Through the chair to Councillor Bell. This program, I'll be honest, for it to work, we need resident buy-in. We do not have the resources to enforce this. The OPP does not have the resources to enforce this everywhere at once. What we'll have to do is how we've managed all our concerns in the past. If people have a concern that people aren't abiding by the 40 kilometers an hour, I would suggest that they put something into Brant Safe Streets if they note something in particular. And then that way we can go to the area, we can gather the data and share it with the OPP.
Yeah, I appreciate we don't have all the resources, but my observation is that very few people know what 50 kilometers an hour is. They see a car coming down the road, it could be anywhere between 40 and 80. So we do need to have some more indication, like the signs we have dotted around the county, particularly on the roads that you're changing, to help people understand just how fast they're going, and to help people on the streets know how fast people are going. Otherwise, we will get inundated with requests for change and things like speed bumps. I think we just need to be ahead of that curve.
Okay. Councillor Miller?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I know a lot of residents that would be pleased to know that their neighborhood is 40 kilometers an hour. And Greg, you did clarify in one of your responses that the lack of a better term, the main drags are going to stay at whatever they are. Most of them are 50, like East River Road in Glen Morris, King Street, Maple Street, Burford. Those roads that go through a 40 kilometer zone, they're still 50. Do you see any confusion from that? I mean, I'll be honest, I was confused. I was looking at the map and I think those are still at 50, but do you think it'll cause a bit of confusion for residents?
Through the chair to Councillor Miller, when we roll the program out and we actually start putting the signs in place, it'll be very easy for people to follow. We'll have the 50 kilometers out on the main roads, and then as you turn into these neighborhoods, that we'll have gateway signs that say 40 kilometer an hour road, and then as you leave those, there'll be signs saying that you've left the area. So it'll be, and the signs are different. They stand out.
Yeah, you got a sample in there.
Yes.
We'll see, but yeah, overall I'm happy. Thank you.
Through the chair to back to Councillor Miller, we do plan to take the feedback, and what residents find confusing, we'll listen, and then we'll try to find a remedy to fix that.
Okay. Councillor Coleman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I don't know if this is a question, but I'll probably be on the negative side of some of this, is that this is all great for the urban areas and whatnot like that in the villages. But what are we going to do about the main roads? And I don't mean the main roads of 50 kilometers. I mean the main roads of 80 kilometers. And I'm thinking of Councillor Kyle's road. I think of the road that I live on, Cockshut Road and whatnot like that. They don't travel 80 kilometers. They travel closer to 100. And believe me, every morning I leave my place at 5 o'clock and I'm going up at 85 kilometers an hour, and they're passing me like I'm standing still. So my concern is, what are we going to do about the rural areas? And I'm worried about some of the areas that are also affected, like, and I'm just throwing out Hammond Road, McBay Road, and other areas like that, where there's multiple homes, just as much as there is in the village. Are we gonna lower the speeds down there too? Because that needs to be considered.
Okay. Any other questions, comments? Seeing none. We have a mover and a seconder. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Okay, moving on to 713, RPT-0464-24, various parking and traffic modifications. Mover to get it on the floor. Councillor Bell, Councillor Coleman, questions? Councillor Miller.
Just one, and that was Ellis Ave. Going to put no parking there up to, it sounds like the trailhead, and I understand, yeah, cars can park, it can block people from accessing their fields. That's what it sounds like here. At the trailhead on Ellis Ave, well, at all of them, you have the gate to the trail, and it says very clearly, no parking in front of the gate. And now we want to put no parking along the road up to the trail. So my question is, if we do that, people want to use the trail there, do they have a place to park, or is that something that we should be looking into?
Okay.
Yes, through the chair to Councillor Miller. The only reason why we're making that space there is because there's visibility issues when people are trying to cross the road. So there's still parking opportunities there. They just have to park a little further from the trail. Since they're walking, shouldn't be too much. We're not asking them to walk too far. It's just we need better visibility of people crossing the road there.
Sorry, follow up then.
Yep.
How far away then, Greg, from that parking or trailhead would they be allowed to park?
Through the chair to Councillor Miller, it's 70 meters total from the center of the trail, so it's 35 meters either side of the trailhead.
If they can't park, or they can park?
That they can't. So 35 meters away to the right of the trail, they can start parking. Okay. And then they can just walk the 35 meters to the trail. It's on the Ellis Road map, and it's highlighted in pink. If they just park beyond that pink dotted line, they'll be legal. Okay. All it is just to improve sight lines. As people are approaching, they'll be able to see someone standing at the side of the road. And furthermore, a pedestrian will be able to see an approaching car.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions on that report? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? That is carried. 714 RPT-0466-24, new aggregate assessment subclass and new tax rate. Can I get a mover? Councillor Miller. Second, Councillor Oakley. Questions? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? That is carried. 715 RPT-0473-24, Scotland Fire Station Improvement and Water Access. Can I get a mover? Councillor Miller. Councillor Garneau. Questions? Councillor Miller.
Just a comment that I'm happy to see this after 5 or 6 years.
Any other questions, comments? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? That is carried. 716 RPT-0474-24, purchase of Paris Fire Station tanker apparatus. Mover, Councillor Coleman. Councillor Kyle. Questions? Chief's getting off early. They're easy today, huh? Okay, seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Okay, 7.2. Anybody want any of those pulled? If not, looking for a mover for all three. Counselor Coleman, Counselor Oakley. No questions? All in favor? Opposed? Those are carried. Section 8, staff reports, RPT-0465-24, the 2024 Development Charge Background Study Bylaw. Get a mover to get it on. Counselor Bell, second. Counselor Kyle, questions? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? That is carried. 8.2, RPT-0419-24, the Winter Sidewalk Maintenance Program. Councillor Garneau has a conflict. Can I get a mover to get it on the table? Councillor Miller, Councillor Kyle. Questions? Councillor Miller.
Just the number of complaints that came in was very similar to previous years, and last year we didn't have much snow. We had hardly any. I'm just wondering why the complaints were almost the same. Was it ice? What was it?
Right.
Through the chair, yes, we had a lot more ice events, and we had, because it was nicer, it was also my opinion more people were out walking, so that's what generated. Have a sunny day, but then we also had some melt thaw, freeze thaw cycles, and we also had a lot of freezing rain compared to previous years. So even though the numbers were the same or basically the same, I was happy to see they weren't increasing.
I thought they would have dropped, but that's just what I thought. Okay, second question. So somebody doesn't clear their driveway or the sidewalk because they're in Florida. They get a notice. They're not home. Somebody doesn't respond to a notice. We still go ahead and, if it's not clear, do we still go through the process of putting it, getting a contractor, putting it on their taxes, even though maybe they don't know about it?
Right.
Through the chair, I wish Greg Bergeron was here to take that one, but I'll take a stab at it and apologize later, I guess. When people go, homeowners or people go away, it's up to them to make arrangements to have their sidewalk cleared when they're gone. Once the notice is given, speaking with Greg, that starts the clock. They'll come back the next day. If it's not cleared, then they'll have the contractor come in, clean it, and the property will be invoiced accordingly.
Okay, thank you. Three, Mr. Like in the report, it said that once they were contacted by bylaw, compliance was excellent. But my concern is that some people may not be contacted because they're not here. But I guess it's incumbent upon the homeowner, I guess, to be cognizant that they have to do that. I don't know if we have any education to let people know that, hey, if you're going away, the sidewalk is still your responsibility. I don't know if that's part of this process or not. I don't know if anybody can respond to that.
Through the chair, Councillor Miller, we do a lot of education on sidewalk clearing and residents' responsibilities for that. And since the bylaw changed again this year, I will speak with the communications group and Greg Bergeron to see if they can pull something together, and I'll offer some help if I can. Maybe we can get some stuff out this fall in advance of winter.
Yeah, I think that would help. Thank you.
Perfect. Councillor Bell, because you got to leave shortly, and then Councillor Oakley.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Greg, three questions. We have a lot of new sidewalks this year, and both Councillor Pearce and I have had a number of requests for help from people who now have inherited a sidewalk and are actually physically incapable of cleaning it. I think we need to think about, can we step up our efforts to help support people, aging people, infirm people that can't clear the sidewalks, that are now obliged to clear the sidewalks. Could you comment?
Yes, through the chair, Councillor Bell. Yes, I'm working on that. We have our Snow Buddies program here, so it's being looked at, and again, it's not a program run through our the roads department, but as those requests come in, I'm working with that group to get them in contact with the residents that are making the request. And hopefully, I think they're working with a new group, if I'm right, minor hockey or something, or one of the youth groups, to go out and help these people that need a little bit of assistance. Some of these high school kids need it for credit, and they also need something good to do in the winter. So,
Yeah, good. Thank you. Appreciate that. Second question. We have labeled the walkway down Laurel and then across the Lions Park through to Mechanic Street as one of our routes for school children. I don't see a blue mark going through the park, but I presume that the park will be cleared to allow a safe passageway.
through the chair, that is correct, Councillor Bell. That's just this map here that I provided is what Roads does, but the Parks Board also does that, and they've committed to having that done again.
Okay, glad to hear the parks are committed to that. Final thing, I think there's an opportunity here. If we were to clear the pathway through Lions Park, it would, given that we've got an access into Lions Park already cleared, it would provide a safe walking space for people in winter. People need to get out, they need to get their exercise, but many people can't take that risk because of the state of the sidewalks. So if we took it upon ourselves to clear the sidewalks there around Lions Park, we could create a loop for people to walk. I would appreciate if parks would consider that if they're being so generous as to clear the rest of Lions Park as well. Phil, thank you.
Councillor Kyle, or sorry, Councillor Oakley.
Through the chair to Greg. I suppose more of a request than a question. So I am going to attempt to defer this to the accessibility committee later on, but failing that, if this does pass today, would it be possible to share this with the accessibility committee? I think one of the major concerns that I had with the snow clearing and leaving it as a resident tackled issue is the people who most suffer from this are, as Councillor Bell mentioned, seniors or people with disabilities who are, or even parents with strollers who are unable to navigate our communities when snow isn't cleared properly, particularly at intersections. So if this does pass today, if we could pass this on to the accessibility committee just for their information. Thank you.
Sure, that can be done. Any other questions? Okay, all in favor? Oh, sorry.
Through the chair, if possible, I would like to defer this so that this can go to the accessibility committee, have comment, and then come back, if possible.
Okay, so seconder for the deferral. I do not see one. But my understanding here is we can definitely get it to that committee. Fair?
Yes, through the chair, Councillor Oakley, I have been invited to some of those meetings to improve accessibility throughout the community. So what I'll do is once council approves this at the end of the month, I will forward it to Sheena Yerrick to get it on their agenda, and then I can attend that meeting and answer any questions that they have.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so all those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Councillor Garneau, come on back. Councillor Chambers, welcome. Okay, so we're going to move on to 8.3, RPT-0460-24 is the Oakland Community Center renovation. Can I get a mover to get it on the board? Councillor Coleman, Councillor Garneau. Questions on that report? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Okay, moving to section 9, committee reports. Brant Connects committee minutes. Can I get a mover? Councillor Miller? Councillor Oakley? Questions on that report? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. 9.2, Accessibility Advisory Committee report. Can I get a mover? Councillor Oakley. Seconder, Councillor Kyle. Questions? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? That is carried. 9.3, Cemetery Advisory Committee. Can I get a mover? Counselor Miller, Counselor Oakley. There's only a few of you out there, folks, so don't be shy. Any questions on that report? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. 9-4, Tourism Advisory. In the mover, Counselor Kyle, Counselor Coleman. Questions? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. 9-5, Brand Heritage Committee Report. In the mover, Counselor Miller, Counselor Oakley. Thank you. Any questions? All in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Okay, communications, I don't see any. Other business, Counselor Miller, you had something.
Just a question, perhaps Mr. Walton can help me with this one. I'm asking on behalf of a couple of residents. That is Cleaver Road Bridge, the one that's closed. We're looking at having some public engagement. I'm just wondering where we are in the process. And the reason I'm asking is because if we delay it long enough, technically that keeps it closed. Thank you. That's all I need to know.
Okay. Nobody else, anything under other business? Okay, so we are going to be going in camera for two issues. Convene in camera to discuss items RPT-0441-24, a proposed or pending acquisition or disposition of land by a municipality or local board regarding 777 Watts Pond Road, 793 Watts Pond Road, 303 Grand River Street North, 321 Grand River Street North, 334 Grand River Street North, and 340 Grand River Street North, as well as RPT-0463-24, proposed or pending acquisition or disposition of land for Rest Acres Road, legal agreement amendment. I'm going to move her to go in, please. Councillor Coleman, Councillor Kyle, no questions on that? All in favor? Opposed? We're going to take like a 2-minute break here, folks. Okay, we are back in open session now. There is nothing further I see on the agenda. Councillor Chambers?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I apologize for being late to the meeting. Before the meeting ended, I just wanted to bring members of the committee and staff aware of something that's happening right now, which is of interest, I think, and that is in Hamilton, there is an OLT hearing going on. It started in the middle of last week, and it is dealing with an application that was a developer putting an 8-story building with 300 some odd units into a neighborhood in Stony Creek. And the appeal was for lack of decision. The staff had was going to recommend apparently to not approve, but it's very similar in many ways to the application that was before us at the last council meeting. In this application, there were over 449 pages of documents from residents submitted. There was an open house that attracted hundreds of people. There were a dozen public delegations at their planning committee meeting, and all of them were not in favor of it, obviously. But stay tuned. This week, the decision will probably be made on whether or not this application will be approved to put an 8-story apartment building into a neighborhood, adding 300 additional units. So just for curiosity, it'll be in the Hamilton Spectator, no doubt. So I'm curious to see how the Ontario Land Tribunal will handle an application putting an 8-story building into a neighborhood where the neighborhood doesn't want it.
Interesting. Thank you for that information. Anything else? With that being said, our next meeting is November the 19th. Motion to adjourn.